This is the story of the first generation of American women who walked into a store, put down their own money, and answered to no one about how they spent it. In the Roaring Twenties, the flapper is remembered for her bobbed hair and her short hemline, but the haircut was never the real revolution. The real revolution was the paycheck inside her handbag. For the first time in the nation's history, a wide band of ordinary women earned, spent, and borrowed on their own account. And that quiet shift in who held the dollar rewired American life for good. To understand how strange this was, look at the woman who came right before her. The ideal of the early 1900s was the Gibson girl, tall, poised, corseted, drawn into magazines as the picture of refined American femininity. Gibson girl history is the history of a beautiful cage. She was admired, she was courted, and she was almost entirely without money of her own. In most of the country, a married woman's wages, if she earned any, flowed straight to her husband, and credit was filtered through fathers and husbands. The Gibson girl was meant to be looked at, not to look after a bank balance, and that arrangement was not just custom, it was law. American legal tradition long treated a married woman and her husband as a single financial person, and that person was him. Coverture erased a married woman's independent legal identity. Her wages and her property were assumed to run through him. The idea that a young woman might support herself on her own earnings sounded, to many people, like the description of a woman in trouble. Then the floor shifted. The First World War pulled millions of men out of factories and offices, and women stepped into the empty chairs. They ran punch presses, kept the books, worked the switchboards, and tasted something their mothers rarely had, a wage that arrived with their own name on the envelope. When the soldiers came home, the country expected the women to quietly hand the jobs back and disappear into the kitchen. Many did. Many young single women refused to go, and they became the workforce the Roaring Twenties was built on. The numbers tell the story plainly. In 1920, women already made up nearly a quarter of the American labor force, and roughly 8 1/3 million women over the age of 15 worked outside the home. By the end of the decade, more than half of all single women were earning wages. That same year, 1920, two milestones arrived almost together. In August, the 19th Amendment gave many American women the right to vote. And just weeks earlier, in June, the federal government created the Women's Bureau inside the Department of Labor, an office built specifically to study and defend the woman worker. The state was finally admitting, on paper, that the working woman was here to stay. What kind of work was it? Mostly, it was the new world of the office and the shop floor. The young woman of the 1920s was often a typist, a filing clerk, a stenographer, a switchboard operator, or a salesgirl behind a department store counter. The work could be dull and the hours long, but it was clean, it was urban, and it paid in cash every week. She often lived in a boarding house or a shared apartment, not her father's home. She dressed in clothes she bought with her own money, and collected an envelope of cash that was hers. For a young woman fresh off the farm or out of a crowded tenement, that envelope was a kind of freedom her grandmother could not have imagined. The size of that paycheck mattered because equality stopped at the cash drawer. Women were funneled into a narrow band of jobs that everyone agreed were women's jobs, and those jobs paid less by design. On federal contract work in 1920, men commonly started at around 40 cents an hour, while women started at around 25. Women were earning roughly 57 cents for every dollar men made doing comparable work. Roughly a third of all working women were still domestic servants. A woman could be a nurse but rarely a doctor, a school teacher but rarely a principal, a clerk but almost never the manager who signed her checks. The ceiling was low, and it was deliberate. And yet, even a smaller paycheck, multiplied across millions of young women and spent on their own terms, became one of the most powerful economic forces of the decade. This is the part of Roaring Twenties flapper wealth that the fashion histories skip. The flapper was not just spending money, she was a brand new kind of customer. An American business reorganized itself to chase her. Look first at how she looked, because the look was the money made visible. The corset of the Gibson girl was gone. In its place came ready-made clothing, mass-produced in standard sizes and sold cheaply through catalogs and department stores. The Sears Roebuck catalog alone brought the latest styles to women far outside the cities, and a shop girl no longer needed a seamstress or a wealthy mother to dress in the latest fashion. She could buy it straight off the rack with her own wages. The same went for her face. The cosmetics industry exploded in the 1920s, pushed along by Hollywood, where silent film stars like Clara Bow and Gloria Swanson made painted lips and dark lashes look like the height of modern glamour. Makeup that respectable women once hid in shame was now sold openly at the corner drugstore, priced so that women across very different incomes could afford the same fashionable mask. The flapper look was democratic, and it ran on disposable income. Business noticed exactly who was buying. Advertisers figured out women made a huge share of household purchasing decisions, and they rebuilt their entire approach around her. Ad writers were coached to speak in a woman's own language, in the soft, intimate tone of a conversation at the glove counter. Products once aimed squarely at men, like automobiles and radios, were repackaged to appeal to female buyers. Companies even invented new anxieties to sell the cure. Listerine took ordinary bad breath, gave it a frightening medical name, halitosis, and sold the fear of it to women worried about romance and respectability. By 1929, American companies were spending more than $1 billion a year on advertising, and a great deal of that money was aimed at the woman with a wage and a wish list. Then came the tool that turned the flapper's wages into something even bigger: credit. The 1920s taught America to buy now and pay later. Installment plans let a working person take home a washing machine, a radio, or a phonograph for a small payment down and a little each month after. The effect on the national balance sheet was staggering. Consumer credit grew from about $1.33 billion to more than $7 billion. By the end of the decade, around 80% of radios and 60% of automobiles were being bought on credit. For the first time, a young woman with a clerical paycheck could furnish a modern life on the installment plan, surrounding herself with appliances her mother would have had to save years to own, if she could have owned them at all. This is the engine underneath the whole glittering decade. The story of vintage women money is not really about a few wealthy heiresses. Millions of ordinary working women helped power the consumer boom of the Roaring Twenties. F. Scott Fitzgerald captured the glitter of that world in The Great Gatsby, but what lay underneath the parties and the new money was this: the flapper dancing in a speakeasy and the flapper clocking into an office at 8 in the morning were the same person, and the second one paid for the first. But here is where the story turns, and where it earns its honesty. The money was real, and the freedom was real, but the law had not caught up. A single woman could earn and spend, but the moment she married, the expectation in most workplaces was that she would quit. Marriage bars required women to leave their jobs upon marrying, and they were standard practice across teaching, banking, and the civil service well into the mid-20th century. Her independence had an expiration date stamped on her wedding day. The new electric appliances that promised to free her from housework often did the opposite, raising the standards of what a clean home and a good meal were supposed to be. So the work simply expanded to fill the time the machines were meant to save. And the deepest barrier was the one most people never saw: the bank itself. A woman might earn a wage in the 1920s, but her ability to hold her own bank account, take out a loan, or get credit in her own name stayed tangled in rules that assumed a man stood behind every responsible dollar. The coverture laws had been weakened, but their shadow was long. The history of women's bank accounts and the long fight for financial independence did not end in the Jazz Age. It barely began there. A flapper could spend her money with dazzling freedom. Securing it and building lasting wealth from it was a battle that would stretch on for another 50 years and more. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act finally stopped lenders from discriminating against women in their own name. So what actually changed forever? Not the law, at least not yet. What changed was the expectation. Before the 1920s, a young woman managing her own money was an exception, sometimes a scandal. After the 1920s, it was ordinary. An entire generation grew up knowing, from their own experience, that a woman could hold a job, collect a paycheck, choose what to buy, and answer to herself while she was single. That memory did not disappear when the decade ended in the stock market crash of October 1929, the collapse that history remembers as Black Tuesday. It survived the Depression and a Second World War, and it surfaced again every time women pushed for more. The flapper is usually filed away as a costume, a fringe dress, and a long string of pearls. But strip away the glamour and you find something far more durable underneath. She was the first mass generation of American women to feel, in their own purses, what it was like to be paid. She spent that money on her own clothes, her own home, and her own good time, and in doing so she helped build the modern consumer economy and planted an idea no decade since has been able to uproot. The bobbed hair grew back, and the hemlines moved with fashion. The woman with her own paycheck, deciding for herself where it would go, never really went away. If this hidden financial history behind the flapper changed how you think about the Roaring Twenties, do one small thing for me. Comment yes below, so I know these forgotten money stories are landing and I keep digging up the next one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.